Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another former player interview with me, Jacob Kirkbride, here on SAFC Fan TV. This week, joining me is a man who had a lot of memorable moments during the Howard Wilkinson and Mick McCarthy days of playing for Sunderland Football Club, Matty Piper. Matt, how are you doing, mate?
How you doing, Jake? You all right, mate?
Yeah, not too bad, man. Not too bad.
Thank you for the nice introduction. I also played under Peter Reid as well. He's the one that signed me. And
yeah, was just
him and Mick McCarthy.
Yeah.
Probably my favourite managers.
Yeah, Reedy left not long after you joined, though, didn't he? It was only like a 2-month spell he had with it.
Yeah, I think about 13 games, and he actually got sacked while I was away with the under 21s. So not great, but no, pleased to be on the show, mate. Looking forward to it.
First of all, seems like you're doing well. How's work going at your own football academy at the moment?
Yeah, good. I mean, we started in 2017, but it's an idea that I probably had back in 2008, 2009 that I wanted to run and, support my own football academy. So it's been a long time in the making, but we've got about 50 boys at the minute that we work with every day, education and football. So no, everything's good at the minute, and we're trying to get some good results with these boys from the inner city suburbs of Leicester.
Yeah, but I can just imagine, particularly working at a lot of football academies now, just getting used to like these new restrictions that have been put in place, things you can and can't do. I think it will eventually get to a point where people will be like so used to it, where when we eventually move away from this, it'll be hard to just like adjust back into normal life, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, massively. I mean, the lucky thing that's happened between the education sector is that the fact that you can have bubbles. So we've got 3 sort of groups of people. We've got first years, second years, and then we also run a gym program. So each bubble sort of just have to stay restricted to each other. So it's been quite easy going actually since we got back, because we can't all embrace each other and everything. So the old cuff, you ever cuff people when you meet them? yeah the old cuff has become even more popular on the at the academy, because we can't touch hands or high five or whatever. So no, but everything's all good, mate. It's all going in the right direction.
Yeah. How have you coped overall in 2020? Because it's been like a very difficult year for a lot of people. And how did you just cope being in the lockdown period that we were in this year?
It's been quite difficult, if I'm honest. It started out all right, because it was, you're hearing all the horror stories on the TV and the news, and every night you're turning the TV on and the news, and you're seeing how many people sadly losing their lives, and that was awful. And you're locked down in your own house, especially Leicester. Leicester's been in a huge lockdown.
Yeah, very bad.
Yeah, it's been awful. And with me, so I have 3 boys with my former partner, and I have a stepdaughter with my current wife. So I have the boys 3 times a week, and the mum has them 4 times a week. So not knowing at the start whether that I was going to be able to see the boys when we was in full lockdown was a bit of a nightmare. And then, when you get symptoms and the people that are in the house at the time after lockdown with you. So that's what sort of happened at the start. But luckily, the government said, if you're a family, I can still see the kids. So they were still coming around my house 3 times a week. But it's been difficult, mate. And I know it's been difficult for everyone, but especially someone that's, struggles from time to time with mental health issues and things like that. It was really difficult, and it's just lucky that I've got good people around me, my missus, and through what I've been through before, I still had all those things in place to help me get through it, as in I can still train and do the fitness every day. The government let us out for walks and the exercise time. That really helped me. But no, it has been difficult. I'm not going to lie. There's been some shocking days where I felt as bad as I've ever felt. But luckily, you know, I've got them things in place now to bring me through them times, and that's all what happened.
Yeah, I guess right now a lot of people are just so confused at various parts of the country what the rules are for certain places. To be honest, everyone's just like completely baffled by it, where there's one rule in one city you're in, and then if you go down to London there's completely different rules. And I think right now it's just because we're heading into like a very uncertain winter. We don't know what's going to happen. I think people just have to sit tight and just hope for all the best they can, and just pray going into the start of 2021 it will be completely different. So moving on, Matt, the first place I want to start is your new book, Out of the Darkness. First of all, can you tell me, what is the book all about?
So obviously it's an autobiography, so it is about my life, but normally you think of football biographies in, you know, most of the things that were going on in the dressing room and on the pitch. But as most Sunderland fans know, I didn't spend much time on the pitch. So I sort of, you know, thought more about the stories of when I was off the pitch and what was going on with me. So it's obviously a life story about me. It tracks everything from when I was young and how I got into football and how I came to be at Leicester City and going through my Leicester City days, and then to the Sunderland days, the England under-21 days, and then most of it, really, the last 6 or 7 chapters is dedicated to sort of the way down to rock bottom, and how it can all unravel and, you know, go wrong after the football career is finished. So I was only a professional footballer until I was 24. And when that came out, when me and Joe Breen, the guy who wrote the book, when we were sort of talking through it, I've always believed that I was 26 when I finished football. Didn't realise it was 24. So
that's the age I'm at now. It's mental.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I'm looking at you now, mate. A fresh-faced London,
thanks.
London Macum, Cockney Macum. Brilliant, mate. And I'm like thinking, 24 years old, so I still had all of my life in front of me, obviously at that point, and I couldn't handle it. I just couldn't handle not being a footballer anymore, and most importantly, not knowing what I wanted to do next. So that's obviously when I picked the bottle up, the drink, started taking drugs and craziness like that, and life went downhill very quickly. But I managed to come through that period, and, you know, the final few chapters, luckily, were about what life's like now and how I try and be positive every day and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to give a shout out to the author Joe Breen. I remember meeting him when I was on work experience at 442 magazine. He's a very nice guy, and but also the main question I want to ask is, what message does the book send out for people reading it and then taking on the advice you give going into the future?
I think it's quite an easy one. It's a story of hope, because, you know, when I think back about my life, or even when Joe wrote the book and I read it back, because obviously before it comes out, I read it as a story and tried to disassociate myself with the story. So I'm reading it as like a third person that doesn't know the story. And halfway through, I'm like, wow, this geezer's never getting out of this. He's drinking, he's crashing cars, he's drink driving, he's alienating people very close to him. He's turned into not a very nice human being. And, you know, he's tried to commit suicide. So you're looking at that and you're thinking, there's no way out of this. But we obviously tracked the story as it went throughout my life. And luckily, you know, it turned around. And it means that, you know, I know there's a lot of people going through stresses and struggles at the minute. And I think what I really wanted to come out of the book, that it's never over, ever. So I know people get to a certain point where they think, this is never going to turn around. I'm never going to be able to get back to who I was before, or where I have aspirations or dreams to be. but they can still be fulfilled.
Mm.
And I'm living testament to that at the minute. I'm not quite where I want to be yet, but I'm on my way there, and I'm definitely 10 million steps ahead of where I was when it was at its lowest. So to answer your question, mate, I think it's a story of hope.
Yeah. And obviously you were touching on there a few like mental health issues you were going through in your career. Yesterday was World Mental Health Day, which is now a big occasion throughout the world. How would you say football has changed tackling this particular problem compared to the time when you were playing in the Premier League and also in the Championship for Sunderland as well?
Not very much, I don't think. I mean, obviously I'm on the outside now looking in, but I can still imagine, you know, the stories are very similar. You know, people who are struggling, who are footballers. Hopefully there's been the good thing is I think the awareness is raised, and not just for footballers, I think worldwide in anything that you do. You can be a dustman, you could be a health worker, you could be a footballer. Anyone at any time can struggle from mental health issues. And I still think football struggles to not identify them people, but to try and help and support them people. Because if you're the owner of a football club, or you're the manager, or you're the chairman, and you've got a player that comes to you that is a commodity of the football club, and you need them operating at high mental levels to be able to get out of them what you need on the football pitch, because football is about winning games, and they're not operating at that level, are you going to, you know, really put their health and their well-being at the forefront of everything, or is it going to be the results? I still think it's going to be the results. So I think it could do more. I think it may have got a little better, but I still think it could do a lot more to try and support people that are going through a struggle. And that's not just in football, that's in all areas of life. I think there's still a huge stigma about, don't talk to me about mental health because I don't want to hear it. And that's not just football clubs, that's sort of everyone. There's still a stigma attached to it.
Yeah. What would you say your own message is? I know people would need to read the book to like deep into this topic a little bit more, but your own message for people to like open up a little bit more, because we've seen a lot of posts on social media over the weekend about people talking about their life struggles and like having the guts to like share it to the rest of the world. Because you played in a time when there wasn't hardly any social media knocking about, how did you deal with your own struggles from retiring from football, playing at 24, and then just moving on to the next chapter of your life, and also the issues you had whilst you were a player as well?
Yeah, well, the moving on part was the big downfall for me. I didn't move on. I still lived like I was a footballer. Finished at 24. I was still living like a footballer until I was 27, 28, spending huge amounts of money, not really trying to find the next thing that comes in life. Because my biggest advice would always be, you have to have a purpose in life. And whether that's the smallest thing to the biggest thing, whether it's the dreams that you've had since you were a kid, you know, my purpose and identity was to be a footballer since I was 8 years old. So once you get there at 19 and you're playing in the Premier League and you're seeing yourself on Match of the Day, you've fulfilled that purpose. It was important then, even before the injuries came, that I found another purpose, another passion, because that's what continuously keeps us moving forward, I think. So it was sort of, now I look back as a mature man, with the knowledge that I have now, it was always going to go that way when I finished football at 24, because I never had anything else set up. I never had any other hobbies. I never had any other purposes set up. So it gets to 24 and your main purpose in life is gone. And then you're continuously looking for what is next. And if you've not already, you know, set that up or found that, of course you're going to struggle.
Mm. Right, Matt, moving on to your career at Sunderland. Obviously, something I forgot to touch on at the beginning, you were actually signed by legendary manager Peter Reid back in the summer of 2002. You were tipped as this exciting young player at the time. You were playing for England at under 21 level. I believe you had a few caps when you came in. But obviously, your Sunderland career, particularly in your first season, a lot of low, finishing bottom of the table, being relegated. Peter Reid was sacked in the October. Howard Wilkinson came in, but there were so many stories to pick out from your Sunderland career, going from Mick McCarthy starting scraps in airports, falling asleep on the toilet. There was one that I heard about that. Getting spat at by Newcastle fans coming in the entrance at St James's Park, to getting digs thrown at you by Howard Wilkinson. But the first story I'm going to come to is with the man Sergeant Wilco, who you saw in your eyes at Sunderland as not a very good manager when he came in and got the job. Obviously, you have, I guess, looking at you now, you have a lot to get off your chest about the man. I want you to run through the story, which honestly, I just want to burst out laughing now. The day he got sacked and called the players to the training ground, I can imagine by this point he was sticking on too many VHS tapes of Geese and David Attenborough. By this stage, everyone was sick of it. It was funny because I was watching the David Attenborough film on Netflix the other night. I was just expecting him to make like a cameo appearance in the background of one of the shots or so. But yeah, going on to that story, obviously at that stage of the season, you were just getting absolutely mullered by teams week in, week out. You didn't realise you got the sack at that point. You were called in, and how did the meeting start? Like, how did he address it?
Yeah, so this is probably my favourite. Well, it's the most standalone story in my head every time I think of my career at Sunderland Football Club, and it is. I mean, I've said it quite a few times now, but it is.
It's brilliant, honestly.
It's about a guy called Tom Peters. So when you're sort of within a football club, there's sort of guys in there that people forget about. You know, especially fans, guys that have been brought into the football club and haven't played a lot of football. And Tom Peters, who will always remain a legend for me, because I like people that stand up against authority or just fall into the line the way other people think it should be. And I'm not just talking about football, I'm talking about all life. So the fact that, you know, Tom Peters eventually went up against the manager, for me, was brilliant. So the story goes, so Peter Reid had been sacked. Howard Wilkinson had obviously been sacked.
Yeah, Sergeant Wilco.
Sergeant Wilco had been sacked, but none of his players knew about it. And he was having, as you said, with the David Attenborough meetings and playing the Geese videos to try and get us to make us play better. Or he used to get outside companies to come in, and the club used to pay massive amounts for these team building companies to come in, and we'd be doing all the honesty falls where you fall in and your teammates have to catch you off table and things like that. So he was really going deep into the resources.
I mean, you must be thinking, like, when he was doing that, are we back at school or something? Like, we're grown men doing this. We're meant to be working on our football. What are we doing this for?
Well, exactly. And you know, sometimes when you do those kind of team building exercises, you can see why it's been done, but he was just doing it in really sporadic moments. 7 o'clock in the morning, meet us down the beach at the Sunderland seafront, and we're going to go through this exercise. And you just think, wow, some of this is just crazy. And anyway, so it was an early morning, and he called another one of these meetings. So we thought it was going to be another one of these crazy kind of team building exercises. And he came in, and he got everyone who worked at the training ground to come in. I think it was a Sunday morning. It was a really strange time. And all the players came in, all the youth team, all the reserve team, and all the staff that worked at the training ground. And there was loads of people in there. And he walked in, and you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was really quiet because it's the manager and he's about to announce something. And at this point, I'm thinking, I'm not thinking he's been sacked. I don't think no one is. And he came in and he took his scarf off. He had a scarf on and he had a big long coat on. He took it off. He hung it up. We were sort of in a double dressing room. There was loads of people in there though, because down at the Academy of Light, it's huge. It sort of all molds into one. And he stood in front of us, and all I remember at that point is Steve Cottrell, who was his assistant manager, was sort of snivelling and really had his head down and was making noises in the background as if he was crying. So that piqued my interest, and we're watching, and the manager said, Sergeant Wilco said, today is a very sad day for the football club and everyone connected with it. So I was thinking, Jesus, someone like the chairman's died or something, I thought was going to be said out of his mouth.
I would be thinking the same. If I was
Something like that. That's how we sort of set the meeting up. And honestly, the most important thing at this point is to say how silent it was. So you must have had over 100 people in the room, and you could have heard a pin drop. And he continued. Today, I have been sacked as the manager of the football. And before he finished the sentence, Tom Peters stood up, woo! Woo! Clapping and cheering. Mate, honestly, I've said this story loads, but it's the same every time. It's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard. I think I was next to Tom Peters. I was a feet or two away, and just that sort of relief at hearing that
ducking down, like it wasn't me that said it, but
well, the manager clearly knew who it was. He was on his feet, literally clapping and cheering, and he was going, woo, get in there. And he was saying things like that. And I remember Phil Babb was sitting in the row in front of us, and he turned around and he just said, that's unprofessional. Sit down and be quiet. But he continued. He just kept clapping and cheering. And honestly, mate, it was the best thing I've ever seen, because, and this is why I love Tom Peters so much, it's because my kind of character at that time wanted to do and act out a reaction like that. I was absolutely buzzing in my head that he got sacked. But I didn't have the balls to do it. But this kid stood up, clapped, cheered, and it was a brilliant moment for me.
I mean, that pretty much summed up the nail on the head of how awful that season was as a whole. I remember I had the Premier League Years episode on of that season this morning, and the game that actually sent you down was a 2-0 defeat at Birmingham. But what was funny about it, Birmingham had this player called, is it Christophe Dugarry? He scored the second goal to send you down, and apparently, according to Birmingham fans, they brought him in January. He couldn't hit a barn door at all. Whatever he plays against you, he scores his first goal for the club, and that turned out to be the goal that sends you down. It's just, was it like that season, particularly in the second half of the campaign, people were just taking the piss, more or less, just turning up late for training, just arriving on a match day with their heads down? Yeah, we're just going to get a run about and just have just a little bit of fitness on a Saturday afternoon, not caring about the result and just not understanding the meaning of playing for the club. Was it that sort of atmosphere being in that dressing room?
No, it wasn't. I mean, everyone cared. And I'm not just sticking up for the time that I was at the football club now. Everyone cared. I think what the problem was that a lot of us players identified, we clearly weren't good enough. But secondly, we weren't fit enough. And when you've got a manager that plays videos of David Attenborough talking about geese instead of being out on the training field, and you would go in on a Friday, for instance, the day before a match, or a Thursday, a
luxury training ground as well that had literally just been built.
Yeah, beautiful training ground, and you're thinking, right, let's put the work in on the training ground because we've not been good enough. All us players knew that, but instead, no, we're not out on the grass today, lads. We've got a session in the classroom, or we've got a session down at the ground, or we've got a session down at the beach. And it was all these sessions of team building exercises and watching videos. So we became unfit, we became unconfident, and that was the problem, I think, that season. And if Peter Reid I think a lot of the players say this, if Peter Reid had stayed that season, we may not have had the best season, but we definitely, I think, would have stayed in the Premier League.
I mean, Peter just has the knack of getting the best out of players who like are low on confidence. But I think even when he got sacked that season, I remember watching a podcast of Mickey Gray. I think a lot of the lads could sort of tell it was like coming to the end a little bit. I'm not saying like he was like fed up with his time there and he was ready to move on, but it was almost, I think, I don't know, you might have missed out on a few players he wanted to bring in the previous summer, and I think he was ready to go. Even if he did keep you up that season, potentially, I don't know whether he would have walked away, but it might have been maybe another 1 or 2 years he would have potentially stayed there and then moved on, because I don't think the communication between him and the board was at a great point at that stage, if you know what I mean.
No, yeah. And one of the stories, it was literally 3 days, I think, before I signed, because I signed late. So I didn't sign in the summer. I had missed the whole of pre-season. I did the pre-season with Leicester. I think they played their first game that season against Blackburn. I missed that one. And then I signed in between the first and the second game, because when the window closed. And Peter Reid at the last sort of pre-season game had been swilled with a pint of beer from one of the Sunderland fans. So it was already sort of going the wrong way, but I just think the players were still playing for him. And I think he would have kept us up that season. I really do.
Yeah. We're going to move on to personally a question I want to ask is, was there any moments in the dressing room from that awful season where people were like having a go at each other, that people just wanted to get back on the bus home, or not even potentially get back on the bus? Right, I'll just make my way home, lads. Like I've had enough of this. Was it just that sort of atmosphere in the camp?
For the Howard Wilkinson?
Yeah.
So under Howard Wilkinson, there's two things that really come to mind. So the worst one was actually on my first game for the manager. So I was away with the 21s, and Titus Bramble, who was playing at Newcastle at the time, had the news broke while we were all sitting around the day before a 21s game. So I was away with England, and the news broke that Peter Reid had been sacked and the new manager was going to be Howard Wilkinson. And Titus Bramble turned around to me, and apparently 6 months before, the under-21 manager was Howard Wilkinson for a number of games. And Titus Bramble had played under him. So he turned around to me and he said, mate, he said, you've had a nightmare there. He's an absolute see you next Tuesday. So I was like, oh, Jesus.
What's going on here?
Yeah, there was a guy called Les Reid that worked for, that was like assistant manager of the 21s under David Platt. And little did I know that he was Howard Wilkinson's longtime friend. So later on in the night, Les Reid said to me, oh, what do you think to your new manager, Howard Wilkinson? What do you think about the news? And I said, well, I've heard he's an absolute see you next Tuesday.
Yeah, you know
And Les Reid went, oh, really? And I went, well, that's what I've heard, Les, so I ain't looking forward to it. So when I got back to the club, my first meeting with the manager was, he called me in the office when I came in. I went in and I said, oh, nice to meet you, Gaffer. Really looking forward to working under you. And he said, don't be lying to me. He goes, I know you called me and see you next Tuesday while he was away with England. So he really stuck it on me from the start. But he started me in the first game against West Ham when Trevor Sinclair scored that unbelievable goal.
Yeah, that Di Canio pass, wasn't it?
Di Canio pass, lashed it in the top corner, and the gaffer spent the whole of the half time talk blaming me for that goal because I wasn't close enough to Di Canio, who half volleyed it across the pitch first time. No one could have done anything about that goal. So that was the worst one. And the best one actually was, which I also played in, was the comeback at Arsenal. We were 2-0 down at half time in the League Cup against Arsenal. They had some great players playing. Lumber, Perez.
It was the invincible team, wasn't it? Or on the verge of that, yeah.
Yeah. Colo Torre. And we were 2-0 down. It looked to no hope. He brought me on at half time and we won 3-2. Kevin Kyle and Marcus Stewart scoring the goals. And and this is the thing why I'm not having him as a manager, is because after a comeback like that, when we scored the third goal to go in front, if you look at the clips on YouTube, he's at the side of the pitch going absolutely crazy because we're celebrating, telling us to get back to the halfway line. And part of me understands, because now we're in front, he wants to keep the lead. But most of me was thinking, what a miserable old man. And that's how he came across to me.
Howard Wilkinson, like, it just makes you want, because he'd won the first division title with Leeds back in the early 90s. Yeah, you would have thought he would have brought at least some more experience, knowledge to that dressing room, but it just went completely the opposite way. Right, Matt, we're going to go on to some questions that our fans of our channel have put forward towards you. This first one from a lad called Steve Cass, who is a top subscriber of our channel. He loves the video content that we put out. I don't know how.
I've seen this one on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to answer this one. I really don't. Can you remember meeting me at the BMW garage and then taking me in to see Gary Breen?
What's his name? Steve.
Steve, yeah.
Steve. Well, do you know what? Me and Gary Breen were like really close friends at Sunderland. And what a lot of Sunderland fans wouldn't know about Gary Breen. One, he was a Londoner, just like you, Jake. And two, he was hard as nails, as in street hard. So out on the street, he'd have a scrap, he'd defend himself. He was a really tough kid. But when you looked at him, he sort of got curtains. He was really skinny.
Yeah.
And me and him just struck up a friendship as soon as he got signed to the club. And I used to introduce everyone to him. So I can't remember the specific moment, Steve, but it sounds like me, because I would have took you in there and introduced you to Gary Breen. So thanks for sending the question in, mate. I love it.
Another one is from a friend of mine, Andy McIntosh. He wants to know if there was a game between Leicester and Sunderland, who would you want to win?
Oh, he's killed me. Well, listen, I was born in Leicester, and I've always got big respect for people that support the places that they come from. No offense, Jake.
Easy.
No, I know your mum and dad are born Sunderland Mackhams through and through, and I respect that. I respect that, mate. But so my mum and dad, my dad's from London, but my mum was born in Leicester, and I was born in Leicester. So that's the reason why I support Leicester City, and the fact that it is a difficult one, because if, for instance, I just wouldn't want Leicester to win blindly. So my heart is with Leicester because I was born here, as a lot of the Sunderland Mackhams will understand, because they wouldn't want, they'd always want their Sunderland team to win. So I'm the same for Leicester. The last few times they played each other, especially the first game, this is an interesting one. The first game of the season when Leicester won the Premier League, they actually beat Sunderland. They actually beat Sunderland 4-2. And I was at that game on my stag do. I took about 20 of my mates and we went down, and I was in there, and all the lads were asking me, what do you want to happen today? And I said, I want to draw. Because I thought Leicester would go well that season. And I thought Sunderland would do all right as well. So I wanted to draw.
Well, the funny thing, I remember Gary Lineker putting out a tweet, because it was Ranieri's first season, when he was baffled by the appointment of him, and I think Leicester were tipped.
So was I.
Yeah, they were tipped to go down at the start of that season, weren't they? And they absolutely mullered us that game, 3-0 up at half time. Just couldn't get anywhere near Riyad Mahrez and Jamie Vardy.
Yeah, no, it was I think that game is what gave them the kickstart to that season, because a lot of people, not just Gary Lineker, were unsure about Ranieri, and when he got off to that really good start, it gave them the confidence to move forward. But normally I sit on the fence, but if it was, it's each to their own. If Sunderland were going to go down, if we beat them and we were going to finish mid-table, I would want Sunderland to win. So it's one of them boring answers that I've got to give. I always sit on the fence, because even though I grew up a Leicester fan, Sunderland fans and the football club, brought me to the football club, stood by me, even when I was always injured. And Sunderland fans remain really, really high on some of the favourite people that I enjoy.
Best in the world, mate.
Honestly, they're unbelievable. They let you know when you're not doing too well, but I don't mind that.
I mean, one thing I wanted to say to you that you were touching on, was it Gary Breen being hard as nails? I mean, you could tell even by he is hard as nails by his reaction when he lifted the championship trophy in 2005, just smug and just wanted, we've got the job done. Let's just calm down on the celebrations and move on to the next season. You would have thought he just like lifting it in the air, like showing passion, with just like a casual, normal lift with all the lads behind him, just like jumping up and down for joy. But that just Gary Breen, he was a leader in that team when he, particularly the year we won the league in 2005 under McCarthy.
Yeah, he was massive, mate. And a quick story about Gary Breen, just to show you how hard he was, is because everyone knows Mick McCarthy's a tough manager. Tough man. He was when he played the game for Millwall and the teams that he played for. And Gary Breen stood up for me once, and it was early on in our friendship, so he didn't have to do it. But I'd come back from another injury. He was playing at Preston away, I think. And Mick McCarthy had a bit of a go at me at half time. But I had been out for about 6 months, and it was my first game back. And he said that I weren't tracking back, I weren't fit enough. And Breeny said, listen, Gaffer, let me stop you there. He said, he's been out for ages. He said, start having a go at some of the other lads that have been playing week in, week out and still ain't done well enough. And Mick McCarthy said to him, sit down, Breeny, shut up. I'm the manager and I'm talking. And Breeny went, who are you talking to? And stood up. And Mick McCarthy sort of eased off. And he was, because everyone knew how tough Breeny was. So he became a lot closer to me as friends after he did that for me, because I really appreciated that.
Matt, coming towards the end of this brilliant interview, you've done so many funny moments. Obviously, thank you for coming on. But this is a little thing I want to show you. I'm not sure whether you were playing in this game or not. I have to check the teams. But this is the ticket to my first ever Sunderland game that I attended to with my dad. I must have been about 6 years old. Everton, 24th of August, 2002 at the Stadium of Light. And that's the ticket there.
What? No way.
Yeah.
Is that serious?
Yeah, that's the ticket there.
That is Wayne Rooney, one of Wayne Rooney's first games.
Apparently his debut.
Debut? Yeah. And that was my debut, mate.
Yeah, so you came on for your debut, my first ever Sunderland game that I attended.
Man. Yeah. The major thing that I remember from that game, I had no idea who Wayne Rooney was. No one did at that point. And I came in the sub for Sunderland, and he came on at the same time. And I think I just turned 20 or just about to turn 20. And he was like warming up next to me and was both just about to come on. And I knew he was 16 because I had read it in the programme that he was 16 years old. And I thought, if he comes on and plays left wing, he came on and played left wing and I played right wing. I said, if he comes anywhere near me, I'm going to absolutely annihilate him. I'm going to
get anywhere near him.
I'm going to shoulder barge him off the pitch. I'm going to let him know that I'm the big man. And we went together after about 30 seconds of being on. We both went for the same ball and I tried to shoulder barge him and I landed in the hoardings of the first row of the crowd. And he was 16 and I was 20. And I was like, wow, this kid is going to be something special, I thought at the time. Because not just that, I knew he had the aggression about him, but he also did some nice touches and flicks. And I thought, to be doing that at 16, he's going to be a big player. I didn't quite think he'd go on to what he's achieved now, but I knew he was going to be a big player. That's great, though, that your first game was my first game.
Yeah, this ticket always remain with me forever, man. It's in the scrapbook, which I've had to dust off, which from my tickets over the years. Yeah, man. Anyway, Matt, thank you so much for coming on, man. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Hope to catch you in an away end, sinking the pints when the fans are allowed back in the stadiums in the future, joining us on an away day. You're more than welcome.
I'll be there.
Good man. Anyway, Matt, thanks a lot. Thank you so much for coming on.
Take care, buddy.